In the peaceful village of Arondizuogu, located deep in the eastern part of Nigeria, the sun rose slowly over the hills, casting a warm glow across the farmlands and huts. The village was alive with energy. It was the day before the Ikeji Festival, the most important celebration in the entire year. This was no ordinary festival. It was the time when the people of Arondizuogu honored their ancestors and celebrated the harvest season. Everyone, young and old, was busy preparing for the big day. Children ran around excitedly, their laughter filling the air as they played by the river. The women were gathered around large pots of yam and agusi soup, talking about the masquerades that would soon appear from the sacred forest. The men of the village were busy in the village square, sweeping and decorating the space with palm fronds and mats. Everyone knew that this year's festival would be different, because Pericoma, the village's most famous musician and traditionalist, was going to lead the festival. Pericoma Okoye was a man of mystery and power. He was more than just a musician. He was known as a man with special spiritual abilities. People in the village believed that he could communicate with the ancestors and use his powers to protect the community. He had lived his whole life in Arondizuogu, singing songs that told stories of the village's history, the spirits, and the gods. In his small compound, Pericoma sat under an old udala tree, tuning his thumb piano, also known as the ubo. His face was calm, but his mind was filled with thoughts of the festival. As he strummed the strings of the ubo, his deep voice hummed softly, carrying a melody that seemed to float through the air. Suddenly, a group of young men entered his compound. They were the festival organizers, and they had come to ask for Pericoma's blessing. They knew that without his guidance, the festival would not be the same. "Papa Pericoma, we have come for your blessings. The village is ready for tomorrow," one of them said as they knelt before him. Pericoma smiled and handed each of them a piece of kola nut. "The ancestors are watching," he said. "Go and prepare. Tomorrow will be a day to remember." Night fell over Arondizuogu, and the village was buzzing with excitement. The full moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver light over the village square. The drums had started to beat, slow at first, then gradually faster. It was time for the masquerades to appear. From the sacred Ikoro forest, the first masquerade, Nzeobi, emerged. It was a sight to behold. Dressed in a costume made from raffia and shells, Nzeobi moved slowly, its feet barely touching the ground. The crowd gathered around the village square, watching in awe. The masquerades were believed to be the spirits of the ancestors, and everyone treated them with respect and fear. More masquerades followed. Egbenuoba, the warrior spirit, with a wooden mask that made it look fierce and strong. Ogbagu, the wild animal spirit, who danced unpredictably. And finally, Ajofia, the king of the masquerades, who towered over the others. His costume was elaborate, made of cloth and beads, and his mask was carved with the face of an ancient ancestor. Pericoma stood at the edge of the square, watching the masquerades with a knowing smile. He could feel the presence of the ancestors. This was not just a performance. It was a sacred moment, when the living and the dead walked together. Just as the masquerades danced their way into the square, something unexpected happened. A chief from a neighboring village, known for his arrogance, stepped forward. His voice was loud as he began to speak. "These masquerades are nothing but men in costumes," he shouted. "There are no spirits here. The ancestors do not walk among us." The crowd gasped. Insulting the masquerades was like insulting the ancestors themselves. Everyone knew this was dangerous. The air grew tense and the drums stopped. Pericoma stepped forward, his face calm but serious. He walked slowly toward the chief, his ubo in his hands. He began to play softly at first, then louder. His voice rose as he sang an ancient song, a song that called on the spirits of the ancestors. The crowd watched in silence as Pericoma's voice filled the air. The masquerades, who had been still, suddenly began to move again. Ajofia, the largest of them, walked straight toward the chief, its mask exhuming fear. The chief's face turned pale. He tried to move, but his legs were frozen. Fear gripped him as the giant masquerade raised its hand. The chief, trembling, bowed his head. He had learned his lesson. Pericoma stopped playing and walked up to the chief. He spoke softly. The ancestors are forgiving, but disrespect will not be tolerated. With the chief humbled, the festival continued. The drums began to beat again, louder and faster than before. The masquerades danced with renewed energy, their movements becoming more elaborate as they twirled and leaped in the air. The crowd clapped and cheered, but there was still more to come. Pericoma walked into the center of the square, holding his ubo. His voice echoed through the village as he began to sing a new song, one that called not just on the spirits of the ancestors, but on the entire village to join in. The masquerades, led by Ajofia, circled around him, their feet moving in perfect rhythm with his voice. The energy in the square was electric, and it felt as if the ancestors themselves were dancing among the people. The dance continued long into the night. The village had never seen anything like it before. The people of Arondizuogu knew that this Ikeji Festival would be remembered for generations to come. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the Ikeji Festival came to an end. The masquerades bowed one final time before disappearing into the sacred forest, their duty fulfilled for another year. The people of Arondizuogu were exhausted, but their hearts were full of pride and joy. The chief who had challenged the ancestors left the village quietly, too ashamed to face the people. The story of his encounter with Ayofia and Pericoma's song spread quickly, becoming a lesson to everyone about the power of tradition and respect. Pericoma, tired but satisfied, returned to his home. He sat once again under the udala tree, his ubo in his lap. He knew that his work as a protector of the village's culture was far from over, but for now, he could rest. The ancestors were pleased, and the village was at peace. In the days that followed, the children of Arondizuogu gathered around Pericoma, asking him to tell those stories of the festival. He smiled and began to sing again, his voice carrying the history of his people, just as it always had. We have come to the end of this beautiful story of Pericoma, a mystic dance of the ancestors at Ikeji Festival in Arondizuogu village. As we've seen, this story reminds us that respect for tradition and humility toward the wisdom of the past bring harmony, while arrogance leads to downfall. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more amazing African folktales, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these stories alive. What did you think of today's story? Have you ever heard of a tale about the legend Pericoma, his mysteries and powers? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey to keep our rich storytelling tradition alive.